Well, hello, and welcome once again to The Overcomer. That's the video blog here from Gateway Counseling Center. And I'm Dr. John Hawkins, your host and the owner of Gateway, coming to you right here from my counseling room at Boynton Beach here at Gateway Counseling Center. And we hope to be able to bring you some things today that will help you overcome maybe some challenges that you have in your life. Hey, I got a question for you. Whatever happened to manners? Now, I know that can sound a little bit old-fashioned, but I remember as a kid growing up, one thing my mom would just constantly tell me and kind of drill into me and my brothers when we would go out in public was, hey, don't forget to say please and thank you to people. If somebody, if you ask somebody something, it was always prefaced with the idea of the word please. You wouldn't just say, oh, give me that, well, please, would go in the front of that. If somebody did something for you, mom would always say, now, what do you say to people when they're nice or they do this or do that? It was always be, well, thank you. And so that was something I can just remember. We'd always get that lecture, before we go out in public. And the result would be when we would do that, people would say to mom, oh, you have such nice children. Well, that kind of makes her feel good. And now that I'm a parent, I understand anytime your kids get complicated or your kids get complimented, it always makes you feel good. It makes you feel like, well, at least I'm doing something right, as a parent. It's amazing how as kids, we can act one way when we're out in front of people and another way when we're home. But, that was things that were just kind of normal growing up, things like, well, don't chew with your mouth open, get your elbows off the table. And I could go on about, all of that. What I did find out with just a little bit of manners and that, as the saying goes, the manners would cover a multitude of sins for my brother and I. They could make up for some other things we did that wasn't great. Now, when you teach manners like our culture used to do, you put a veneer of civility over the culture. And that's something that's kind of sadly missing now in our culture. Now, there were always people who would say things in private that they would never say publicly. How they would talk about people, or whether they'd be rude, or whether they would say. We understand that that's just part of humanity. But this idea of the civility and the kindness was especially important to those who were in positions of leadership, because they were influencers. We had influencers back in the day when there wasn't influencers. But you always had people. They could be movie stars. They could be, sport heroes that, before there was TikTok, there was influencers that would be used to sell things, but they would set an example that then kids would want to be, like them. And, there was things that you could say or do, or not say or do that you just wouldn't do it like publicly, or maybe in the movies or on the television airwaves. Now all of that has changed, with all the forms of social media and all the ways that we have to communicate. That whole concept of, manners and some of those things seem rather old-fashioned. And a lot of times it gets mocked or ridiculed today that, hey, that's just not relevant to modern life today. You're really behind the times. But I just wonder, as a society, are we in better shape for jettisoning some of those social mores that we, who are a little older, learned when we were growing up? In my view, I don't think that we are. I don't think the idea of throwing all that stuff out to be a more progressive people, I don't think has made us a better people. What I find is that both young people and old people are in much worse shape mentally and emotionally than they were 50 or 60 years ago. Now, I'm speaking more anecdotally and just from my experience as a mental health professional and somebody that tries to observe culture and keep up a little bit with current events. But what I have seen from my experience is a huge increase in anxiety and depression among both young people and older folks, and a lack of resiliency in this. People are just struggling through life. They don't have any real purpose or meaning. Therefore, it's hard to set goals and they're unhappy. I can't tell you how many young people, teenagers and younger, even middle school and elementary, that are coming in and they've got anxiety and they've got depression, and they have no direction for their life. They don't know what to do, so they're not happy in life because they don't have any purpose, which leads to a lack of motivation and enjoyment in life. And so I think that this has been a problem that has been around for a while. If we study our culture, we see that we have this epidemic of addictions and obesity and autism and crime and pornography. And our families that are the foundation of a society, they're crumbling from the effects of so much of this, from divorce and materialism and government policies that penalize marriage and policies that hurt the middle class and people that are just ordinary working folks. It seems like we work more and our money buys less. And trying to make sense of all of this busyness and all of this stuff that we fill our life up with, trying to have some meaning and purpose and some happiness. So what we end up doing in a lot of cases is, we turn to, entertainment, and we turn to our technology. We just don't talk to each other anymore. I mean, I've seen folks in a restaurant around a table or people in their home, and they're texting each other sitting right next to each other, instead of putting the phone down and just actually talking to each other. And, those days of the family meal, at the evening time where we sit around the table and people talk and interact and find out what went on in everybody's life that day, or talk about current events, or looking for those teachable moments that can have a huge impact on our kids or even grandkids that we're really not that much aware of. And so this has had a detrimental effect in a lot of ways, and many folks, they just don't know what to do about it. It was Socrates who said the unexamined life is not worth living. And so I think one of the big problems we have is we're living what I call an unsustainable pace. We're living at a speed and in a way that God never intended for us to live. That's why people, when they go into nature, they go outdoors, whether it's on vacation or whether it's just out taking a hike, they get more relaxed because that's the effect nature, has on us. So I think it's part of the reason it was designed for that. But we're so busy today. It's just like the story, of Mary and Joseph at Christmas time, when there was no room in the inn, for her. So she had to go to a barn to give birth to the baby, Jesus. So people today, they're so busy, they don't have time for God. Now, how ironic is that? The creator of life, the one who can show us through his principles how to make life work, how to make sense of life, how to find meaning in life. We shut him out and we're looking for the very answers that he can provide for us. So we just keep muddling along with life, trying to make sense of it, and seem to be not doing that great a job in the whole thing. And we're devaluing this wonderful gift called life, because we've kind of forgotten about the principle of the Sabbath, taking time to rest ourselves physically, time to reset ourselves mentally, emotionally, time to reflect upon God and upon our life, because that'll bring some clarity to our life. Now, you may be thinking about now, like, hey, we started out talking about please and thank you. How do we end up in all this heavy stuff? Well, let me try to bring that together for you with a couple principles. I call them the Disney World principle and the Rudy Giuliani principle. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you've been to Disneyland or Disney World, you'll notice something, that there's always an army of people going around picking up trash, sweeping up trash, because it's such a clean place. And it's a nice place. It's a place that people enjoy going to because everything is so neat and perfect, because that's the job of a whole lot of people. Pick up all those papers they're placed, because what they've discovered is if people come in and a place is neat and clean, they're less likely just to throw their trash on the ground. They'll make the effort to go to the trash container and throw the stuff in there, because that cleanliness begets more cleanliness. It brings about a behavior change in the people. Now, that Rudy Giuliani principle is somewhat the same. In case you didn't know, at one time years ago, he was the mayor of New York, and he became the mayor when there was a real crime problem in New York City, and the city was looking run down. And the first step they took to try to turn these problems around, well, they started fixing the broken windows in buildings. And it was the same principle. Take these little things, fix them up, and is from an external view, is people look at this environment where they could take more pride in their city, and it looked cleaner and it looked in more repair. They were more likely to keep it that way. And then they also moved that over into crime. If they would focus the little crimes, like having people not just hop over the subway turnstile. That's a seemingly small crime, but as they would start to enforce those little things that change the behavior of the people, when you got them to do the right thing on the little stuff, then they'd be more prone to get the big stuff under control. Now, we're a pretty divided country today, and we focus more on what divides us versus what unites us. And so we've kind of turned against each other, whether it's racially, whether it's gender, whether it's politically. And a lot of times our politicians have been, guilty of also helping this. They'll do it to pit us against each other to be able to maintain their political power. And so we have a lot of hate speech and demonizing and depersonalizing each other when we don't agree with each other. And that tends to result in to feel like, hey, if I don't agree with somebody, they can be a non-person. It's okay to do anything you want. You could even kill them if they don't agree with you. And that's a bad state for society to be in. Because whether I agree or disagree with people, we're still human beings. We should treat each other properly and try to get along with each other. And that's where the please and thank you come in. They're just such small acts of kindness. And we look at these problems in our culture, and we see the impact in society and people's lives and families, and they seem so big, and we wonder, what in the world could I do to make any difference in this country? Well, maybe please and thank you would just be a good place to start. When you're out there day by day, you hold the door for somebody to go in. You give them a smile. You say please, or you say thank you. It's just these little things. It's that principle that Jesus taught, loving God and love your neighbor as yourself. The golden rule. Treat people the way you want to be treated. Pretty simple. It's not earth-shattering, but that idea of just these random acts of kindness, being nice to each other, starting out with please and thank you. My mom's gone now, but I think if she knew I was still doing that, and we had a nation that was still doing that, she'd be pretty happy about that. And I think God would also be happy about that. So why don't we try that? Just a simple thing that anybody could do, and see how that makes you feel, and see what the impact is in the world in which you live in. Well, listen, if we could be any help to you, if you're going to need some counseling, if you need somebody to talk to, if we could help you any problems, why don't you just go on our website, gatewaycounseling.com, or give us a call here, and we will help you overcome whatever the challenge, adversity is. And so you give us a call. We'd love to help you get through whatever problems that you're trying to get through. Until next time, just remember, you are an overcomer, because that's what God designed you to be. Well, you have a great day and week. I look forward to talking to you soon. Okay, bye now.